Hello, this is Jane Kennedy Overton, and I'm inviting you to keep listening to Reynard Pringle on Inspirational Sports Talk.
Impactful, influential, inspirational sports stories, sports commentary, guest interviews. Welcome to
Inspirational Sports Talk with your host, Reynard Pringle. We've got another great show for you today. You know him as a TV talk show host, an advocate, an entrepreneur, and an author. He is Mr. Tavis Smiley. Tavis, how you doing today?
I'm well, Reynard. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to have you on.
Delighted to do it. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, so we're going to get right into it. So I'm going to take you back sometime. What age were you when you knew that you wanted to get into the world of media?
Ooh, it's a good question. I really didn't know until I was in my late 20s. I worked for the mayor of Los Angeles, Tom Bradley, and had run for city council myself and lost running for a city council race. And long story short, the opportunity to do media kind of opened up to me. And I started doing radio, and that turned into television and books and et cetera, et cetera. Here I am all these years later with a star on the Walk of Fame. I don't know how that happened, given that I hadn't planned to do any of this. But it's been a beautiful ride. But I suspect that my media career started when I was about 26, 27.
Okay, well, you've definitely put in a lot of work. You deserve that Walk of Fame honor. Now, we know what's going on in the NBA with Donald Sterling fiasco, the Danny Ferry down in Atlanta with the Atlanta Hawks. We've seen what's happened to Ray Rice, Greg Hardy, and Adrian Peterson in the NFL. We've talked about these subjects ad nauseum. Going big picture, I wanted to get your opinion on, has professional college and high school sports just become too big in our country?
I don't know that they're too big. I think that the bigger they get, though, they have to be properly managed. And there's got to be the kind of discipline, the kind of rules and guidelines and accountability that goes with a sport that needs to be overseen properly. So I don't know that it's too big per se. There's certainly a lot of money in these enterprises, but I think what's lacking is the kind of proper oversight that these leagues need of the players and, quite frankly, oversight of themselves.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that, Tavis. So as far as the NFL, what do you think that they can do to help repair their image?
Well, I think they've got to put some teeth. They got to put some teeth into their rules and regulations and guidelines. Every player is not. I mean, put it this way: every fan wants to know that they're watching a game that's being played fair on the field. And I think we also want to know that these players are as advertised, that they're upstanding citizens. Nobody's asking these players to be perfect. They're only human. But at the end of the day, we expect them to comport themselves with the kind of respect for humanity. Never do we expect them to contest anyone's humanity on the field or off the field. And so I think that the league needs to make sure that the rules and guidelines are understood clearly. And I think the commissioner was right, Roger Goodell. I don't know how long he's going to last. At one point, I thought he was going to end up, losing his job. At this point, I don't know. He may ride this thing out. I can never tell from day to day. But whether he falters or whether he remains as the commissioner, I appreciate the fact that he has put this commission together to really put together some stronger teeth, some teeth into these rules that they had. I was disappointed to see that the committee initially, I don't know if it's changed, but as I saw, it was all white women. I got nothing against white women, but there should have been some men on that committee, because if you want to deal with sexual discrimination and patriarchy, you need to have men involved in this conversation as well. And there should have been some people of color on that commission as well. So I applaud his efforts to try to, put together a commission that's going to look at what the NFL is doing, what they aren't doing, figure out how they can handle these issues better. But it shouldn't have been a commission or a committee of just white women.
I definitely agree with you on that. Now, Tavis, we know you're on a book tour. Your book, Death of a King, is an outstanding book. I have to commend you on the book.
Thank you.
Now, I love your comment that you said about Dr. King was a public servant, but not a perfect servant. And that rings true, because so many times we're always, we don't listen to the message if we don't like the messenger. So I love that outstanding quote. Now, I wanted to read a part of the book that took me, that really got me excited about the book.
Mhm.
In the chapter Firemen, Dr. King tells Harry Belafonte, I've come to believe that we are integrated into a burning house. And Harry Belafonte asks, what do you think we should do? And Dr. King responds, we have to become firemen.
Mhm.
Now, Tavis, I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on what you were trying to get the readers to understand in this chapter.
That in the last year of his life, that one, King had evolved since the I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington. A lot of folks think King only gave one speech in his life, I Have a Dream, at the March on Washington. And that was 1963. He was giving speeches all the time. But after 63, although he's dead far too young at the age of 39, he does live 5 years after the March on Washington, and his views evolved. He was talking about a dream in 63. By the time we get to this book, it's about the last year of his life, the story that most Americans don't know. That's what Death of a King is. This book I've written is about the last year of his life, when because he came out against the war in Vietnam, everybody and everything, including black people, turned against him. So we don't know that the last year of Dr. King's life was a miserable year where he walked alone because nobody wanted to be around him. They didn't want to be in pictures with him. He couldn't get a book deal. He couldn't get a speech. He was bankrupt. His whole life turned upside down in the last year of his life when everybody and everything, the media, the White House, white folk, black folk, everybody turned on him because he was trying to tell us the truth about the Vietnam War. He was trying to tell us the truth about what he called the triple threat facing this country, the triple threat of racism, poverty, and militarism. So he's going through a lot in the last year of his life because he has evolved since the I Have a Dream speech 5 years earlier. And he was talking about a dream at one point, and in 63, by the last year of his life, which is what this book is about, he says that dream has become a nightmare. In 63, he's talking about integrating and integration. By the time we get to this book, the last year of his life, to the passage you just read, he says, we've been fighting for integration, but I believe we've integrated into a burning house. In 63, he's talking about a dream, but had he lived to get back to his church in Atlanta, he's killed on a Thursday night in Memphis. So that Sunday, he was headed back home to Atlanta to his church, Ebenezer. Had he made it back on Sunday, the sermon that he was going to preach was called Why America May Go to Hell. And folk don't believe that or get it, but that was his sermon. Why America May Go to Hell. He never got a chance to preach it because he got killed in Memphis, but the sermon was going to be based upon his belief, as I said earlier, that we have got to get serious about this triple threat facing our country, the triple threat of racism, poverty, and militarism. And if we don't get serious about this triple threat, then we're going to lose our democracy. So it's about a king that we really don't know, about the journey that he walked the last mile of the way, really, but did so without support from anybody. He was basically alone the last year of his life. But the book also tells stuff about King that we don't know, including his love of music. There's a great story in the book about he's going to see Ike and Tina Turner as they opened one night for Sam and Dave. He was a great, great sports enthusiast. There's some wonderful stories in here about his friendships and relationships with great athletes. Some players for the Dodgers that he was a big fan of and loved tremendously. So there's a lot of stuff in this book about King that the average person doesn't know, but I think sports fans even will enjoy a book about a king that they will get to know for the first time.
Now, Tavis, we talk about being tired. Dr. King said he was tired of being jailed, tired of being beaten. He was sick and tired of being tired. I ask myself sometimes, I get tired, and I'm not half of the man that Martin Luther King was. But in your book, it talks about the dark chambers of pessimism cannot stop me because I always have hope. I thought that was a very intriguing part of the book, and I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, Dr. King was not an optimist, and I am not an optimist. Optimism suggests that there is a particular set of facts or circumstances, conditions. Optimism suggests there's something that you can see, feel, or touch that gives you reason to believe that things are going to get better. I'm an optimist because there's something that I've seen or felt or touched that makes me believe that things are going to get better. That's not the journey that most black folk in this country walk. That's not the journey that Dr. King walked, where he was ever optimistic per se. But he was always, to the contrary, as I am, a prisoner of hope. And that's what your question's about. Hope is all you need sometimes to get up one day and to try it again. I believe that every day we get up, every day we wake up, we get another chance to try to get it right. And so King was always a prisoner of hope. There's a Bible verse that was one of his favorites, I think, and one of my favorites, that says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So this is not about proselytizing. You could be an atheist or an agnostic and still get the point. The point is that you have to believe in something. You have to have a hope that allows you to get up every day and at least try again. I mean, that's what I love about sports. Somebody once said years ago that I think it was Earl Warren, former Chief Justice in California and Supreme Court Justice, eventually, once said that he woke up in the morning and he read the sports pages first because the sports pages gave him a hope for what mankind was capable of. When we watch sports every day, we love watching them because they give us a sense of how on any given day we can rise to the occasion. When you see Tiger do what he does, or you see LeBron do what he does, or you see, just run the list. Whoever your favorite athlete is, whoever you are a fan of, when you see them, we're in football season now, when you see whoever you are a fan of do what they do so well, it ought to inspire you and encourage you to know that whatever your calling in life is, whatever your vocation is, if you practice, if you put the time in, if you put the work in, you put the effort in on any given day, you can be excellent at what you do too. So that's what hope is really all about. Athletes understand what it means to be hopeful. They work at it, but they also remain hopeful that they're going to get better and that they're going to hit the ball or clear the hurdle, whatever the occasion might be. If you don't have hope, then you can't succeed at anything in life, and Dr. King was no different.
Yeah, that's a great part of the book, and I loved it. Now, Tavis, one other part about the book was the drum major. Dr. King spoke of his eulogy, and he was saying that he didn't want his eulogy to be about the Nobel Peace Prize, about the awards and declarations that was bestowed on him. He wanted to be a drum major for peace, a drum major for justice, and a drum major for righteousness. I just wanted you to talk a little bit about the chapter Drum Major.
Yeah, these are the words that appear on the monument. I'm in Washington right now on book tour in D.C., and those are the words from the Drum Major Instinct that appear on the monument that has been erected to honor Dr. King here in Washington on the National Mall. And all King was saying is that, when he died, he said, when I die, don't talk about how many degrees I had or where I went to school or how many awards I received and how many speeches I gave, how many books I wrote, how much money I made. Those things are all irrelevant, says Dr. King. If you're going to say anything about me, just say that I tried to help somebody. Just say that I was a drum major and that I was a drum major for justice. So King was very clear about how he wanted to be remembered. He also knew he was going to die. He was very clear that the death angel was hovering in his face. He knew there was a bullet out there with his name on it. He knew he wasn't going to live a long life. King said all the time that we have no control, Reynard, no control over when we die or where we die or how we die. The only thing we have control over is what we die for. And every one of us ought to live our lives by a certain set of immutable principles that if it comes to death, then so be it. As hard as it is to say this and for folks to understand it, there are some things in life more important than living. I know that sounds strange, but there are some things that are more important than living. And if you live your life by a certain set of immutable principles, then you're okay with whatever the circumstances and outcomes and whatever the pushback is you may get, whatever your haters are going to say, whatever the detractors are going to say. You're okay with that. You live with that. It doesn't mean it doesn't hurt sometimes, but you live with it because you have dedicated yourself to live your life by a certain set of principles. And if that means some hell is going to come and you're going to have some haters, then bring it on. But you got to stand in your truth and live your life on your own terms, and the haters be damned.
I mean, that was a mouthful. I mean, it's an outstanding book. Our listeners are going to love this book. They got it. They have to check this book out. Now, Tavis, we know that you were on Dancing with the Stars, changing directions a little bit.
Yeah.
And we enjoyed seeing you up there, seeing another side of Tavis Smiley. What did you think about the experience overall?
I enjoyed the experience overall. My problem was, as I said, the night we got eliminated, was that it's impossible to perfect anything without putting the time in. And I'm on book tour, and I'm doing 18 hours a day. in different city every day, different city 5 or 6 days a week. I go back to L.A. While I'm on tour. I tape 8 or 10 TV shows. I tape a bunch of radio shows, all in one day. Then I get back on the road again. To try to continue doing what it is that I do. And it's just impossible to perfect the art of dance. I have great respect for the art of dance, but it's impossible to perfect it when you're on the road trying to do a book tour. So most of my competitors had 35 to 40 hours a week at minimum to practice. I only had 8 or 10 hours a week that I was trying to squeeze in on the road. So I loved the experience. It was a beautiful thing. But I guess in the final analysis, this S on my chest really does stand for Smiley and not Superman. I can't do everything. So I had a good time at it. But if I'd been able to do it on a different season when I wasn't on book tour, I think I could have even gone farther. And I asked the producers when they asked me to do it, and I finally agreed. I told them no a few times, and I finally agreed to do it. I asked them about coming on in March for the next season, but they really begged me to come on in September, and so I agreed to do it. And I don't regret the experience. I might have pushed back and said, you know what, I'm just not going to do it. I can't do it in September, maybe in March. But they didn't ask me to come on in March. They asked me to come on in September. So I accepted it, did the best I could. No regrets, ever. Never regrets in my life. I loved it, and just wish we had more time. But at the end of the day, you can't do everything well at the same time.
Well, we're definitely fans, and we definitely appreciated the effort and love seeing you under the globe. So we highlight foundations here on the show, IST Sports. You have a great foundation working with tomorrow's leaders. Tell us about the foundation.
Foundation is dedicated to young people. Dedicated to young people and the notion of youth leadership development. And so we've been at this for a lot of years now, working with young people, trying to help them develop their leadership skills and their leadership talents, because I believe that we've got to make sure that these young people are prepared for the challenges that they're going to face in their lives well into the future. And so many of the issues that we face in America that we aren't having much success in resolving today, we're back to Dr. King again now, talking about that triple threat of racism and poverty and militarism. Some of these issues that we're not making progress on, this next generation is going to be responsible for. So our foundation is working with young people, trying to help them develop their leadership capacity into the future, and we build our whole model around a simple definition of leadership, which is this. We define leadership the following way. You can't lead people unless you love people, and you can't save people unless you serve people. Leadership is about loving and serving people, and that's where we start with trying to get these young people to recognize the capacity they have and the agency they have to be leaders into the future. Our foundation also works on the issue of poverty, so we're in the midst of a poverty campaign right now, a poverty tour, trying to talk about the issue of poverty and make it and push it, I should say, higher up on the American agenda. So as soon as I wrap this book tour, in a couple of weeks, I'll jump right back on my poverty tour. We got a couple more cities this year. We got North Carolina, Winston-Salem, we got Philadelphia. So we're constantly moving around the country trying to talk about the issue of poverty. So it's a busy life, it's a full life, but I'm glad we at least had a few minutes to squeeze in to talk to you, and I thank you for the chance to come on your program, Reynard.
I really enjoyed it. I want to get one last question, if I could.
Sure.
Now, in my business of sports on-air personality, I have a Mount Rushmore, and on my Mount Rushmore, I have Howard Cosell, Bryant Gumbel, Bob Costas, and John Madden. Now, in your world of media, moguls, titans, who would be your Mount Rushmore?
That's a very fascinating and interesting question, and I'm laughing because there are two people on your Mount Rushmore, as you put it, that are also on mine when it comes to the field of media and broadcast journalism. And it's interesting because they have both been known for their sports work, but they also are just as good at covering newsmaker events. And interestingly, two of your people are on my list. I think that Bryant Gumbel and Bob Costas are two of the best broadcasters in the business, particularly and especially when it comes to live television. When Bryant Gumbel was on the Today Show, he was amazing. I love his show on HBO. I watch it all the time. And Bryant and I are friends, and Bob Costas and I are friends. I feel fortunate to be friends with both of them. And they're the best, though. I mean, Bob isn't just he's so good because he doesn't know just sports. Bob knows a little bit of everything. The same way with Bryant. He's so composed on the air. He knows a little bit about everything. But, as broadcasters go, I put Brian and Bob on my list as well of people who do it awfully good. Peter Jennings, who's no longer with us, was one of my favorites. Peter was really, really good in live TV settings. I think Diane Sawyer is good, really good at what she does. But ultimately, I think that the best host, without regard to names, the best host, and what I attempt to do every night on my program, and I'm grateful that people recognize this, the best hosts are the persons who are the most generous listeners. Being a great talk show host is about generous listening. The better you listen to what the guest is saying, the better host you're going to be. So it's kind of funny that when people listen or watch talk shows, they think that the interviewer is leading the conversation. It's not that way. The guest is leading the conversation because if the interviewer is doing his or her job well, whatever the guest says will lead you to what the next question ought to be. So you're really following the guest more than you're leading the guest. Now, you want to be prepared for the conversation, but at the end of the day, if you're really doing your job the way it ought to be done, you are listening to what the guest has to say, and what the guest has to say will lead you to wherever the conversation needs to go, and you'll put that guest in his or her sweet spot. And at the end, you'll find that what you had was not an interview. What you had was a conversation, and that's what you're after every day. And I thank you for allowing me to have a conversation with you.
We are honored to have you on. Ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. TV talk show host from the Tavis Smiley Show and author of Death of a King. Listeners, you have to get that book. Tavis Smiley. Tavis, thanks so much for coming on IST today.
Reynard, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. All the best to you in the coming months and years. You stay strong.
Man, we had an outstanding time with Tavis Smiley. All my listeners out there, be safe and goodbye.